Good morning. My name is Wright, and today I'm going to talk to you about how your personality and the things that you own can be correlated or related to each other. So let me share some information with you. So one of the things that I've noticed is that the collection of shoes that some people own can actually be predictive of personality. So that's one of the things that we're going to use to discuss in terms of stuff that we own and how it relates to our personality. So let's think about this. There's some people out there, for example, my husband, who owns like 3 pairs of shoes. And then there are other people who own lots of different shoes. So some people have small collections, maybe 3, 4, 5 pairs of shoes. Some people own more than 20. Some people own more than 30. So social psychologists would say that we recognize that we have played different roles, and thus we would purchase different shoes to play those different roles or to fit into those different roles. While personality psychologists would say that the purchasing behaviors that we make are due to or related to, I should say, our enduring traits. So that tells us a little bit about the difference between social psychology and personality psychology. Social psychology focuses on the behaviors influenced by the social environment and how the presence of other people can influence our individual behaviors, while personality focuses on the individual's traits and characteristics. So let's talk a little bit about that. So some people may be wondering, okay, who is this presenter? My name is Liz Wright. I have a MA in clinical psychology and a PhD in general psychology with a focus in social and personality. And I do have more than 20 pairs of shoes, by the way. So if you're interested in this topic, definitely check out Psychology of Personality at NBC. So let's talk about what personality is. So personality psychologists have a challenge in defining exactly one operational definition of what personality is. The text that we currently use for my personality class defines it as relatively permanent traits and unique characteristics that give both consistency and individuality to a person's behavior. So let's break that down a little bit. So one thing that we do know through research is that personality is relatively permanent. So I've had a lot of students that say that their personality changes depending on the situation that they're in. And this would be more related to social psychology than it would be related to personality psychology, because our social behaviors may change based upon the social situation that we're in, but our personality does not change due to the social situation. We're still going to be more outgoing or more introverted, regardless of the situation. While we may feel that a role that we play in a social situation influences us to behave in a certain way, we are still more likely to behave based upon our personality, but then also based upon the social demands of that situation. So we also know through longitudinal research that the personality traits that we have as a young adult are very similar to the personality traits that we have as an older adult. We do recognize that some of the traits are going to change slightly. I talk about it as like we shave off a little bit. So we may become a little bit nicer as we get older. We may become a little bit more open to new experiences as we get older, but there's not a dramatic shift. Typically, dramatic shifts in personality only come from a few areas. One might be brain damage, one might be experiences with trauma or PTSD, and then through intentional change, such as through seeking therapy. So again, personality is a pattern, meaning that we consistently see the same behaviors. So typically in personality psychology, we talk about the idea of triangulation, seeing at least 3 instances of the person behaving in a specific way gives us enough data to make a decision as to whether or not this is related to personality or social variables. We can talk about particular traits, such as being artistic or such as being, um, comprehensive, meaning that we like to have all of our ducks in a row, that we want to have all of the pieces together. And then characteristics can talk about humans or traits as a larger group. So if someone is organized, we can talk about that as a characteristic because it has multiple traits underneath it. And again, we're looking for consistency when we're talking about personality. So this relates back to what we were talking about in terms of our personality doesn't change due to the social situation. We're consistently going to behave in a certain way. And then personality is going to influence the behaviors that we do, whether those are behaviors that we're aware of or behaviors that we may not be aware of. So, for example, when we watch people speak, sometimes they are not aware of their quirks. I've watched some politicians in the past couple of weeks that, touch their neck or touch around their throat as they're speaking. So these may be behaviors that are related to personality that people may not realize that they're doing. So one of the biggest theories in personality right now is the big 5 factors theory. And so some people refer to this as ocean, and we'll get into why in a second. The big 5 factors is currently the most researched personality theory within personality psychology. So if you search through the different databases to find articles about personality, you're more likely to come across articles relating to the big 5, which are listed here. So extroversion, neuroticism, openness, agreeableness, and conscientiousness. So these traits, or these 5 kind of mega categories, have been studied and theorized about for many years. And eventually, 2 researchers, McRae and Costa, using factor analysis, which is basically where we take a whole bunch of traits and we have people complete questionnaires about these traits. And then through statistical analysis, we find clusters that relate to each other. So if you've taken statistics or any of my psychology classes, you know what a correlation is. So we look to see what variables or what traits are correlated. And if a group is correlated together, then we can talk about how that loads on a factor. And so through research, they've found that there are 5 major factors that have a whole bunch of traits underneath them. So the 5 factors that we're going to talk about are really on a continuum of not at all to 100%. Most people are not going to be at not at all or 100%. They're going to be somewhere along this continuum. So when we talk about extroversion, we're talking about people who are high in extroversion are more likely to gather their energy from interacting with others, and are going to enjoy interacting with others. They may be loud, they may be the life of the party, they may be the one that sends out invitations to meet up over the weekend, whereas people who are low in extroversion or high in introversion, you can think about it that way as well, are more likely to be more internally focused, self-focused, enjoy more individual activities than they would creating, new groups of friends. So neuroticism, being low in neuroticism, indicates that people are have lower levels of anxiety and experience stress more or less than other people do. Whereas if we have high levels of neuroticism, we're more likely to experience a lot of anxiety, stress out about a lot of different things. Oh, oops, let's go back. Openness is the next characteristic, and we can talk about openness in a couple of different ways. One is openness to new experiences, meaning that people who are high in this category are really interested in trying new stuff. A new restaurant opens and they are one of the first people who want to try it. Whereas people who are low in openness to new experiences prefer to go to the same restaurant, have the same food at the same restaurant. They're less likely to be interested in trying out new things. Now, some recent research into this factor has found that there's kind of almost two factors involved here. And so there's been some discussion of breaking openness into two actual factors, because another part of openness relates to being interested in learning. So learning for learning's sake, as opposed to being, going to college because I have to. So you may meet some people who are high in openness for learning, who, spend hours researching things that aren't related to any sort of paper that they're doing. Whereas you'll meet some people that are not interested in learning new things just for learning new things' sake. So our next factor that we want to talk about is agreeableness. People who are high in agreeableness like for people to get along. They don't want people to fight. They may avoid political discussions because they sense that people are getting angry with each other. Whereas people who are low in agreeableness may be the people online starting the disagreements with other people relating to, for example, politics in the past couple of weeks. And then our last factor is conscientiousness. People who are high in conscientiousness maybe have multiple planners instead of just one. They have reminders set on their phone for when to do things. They may have reminders set on their calendar or their phone for when people's birthdays are. Their car might be clean. Their house might be spotless. So people who are very high in conscientiousness, that's what we're describing. People who are low in conscientiousness may not know when their next assignments for school are due. They may not have a very clean car. They may not be able to recognize where anything is. If you ask them, like, where do you keep the XYZ at your house? They may have no idea and spend a lot of time searching for it themselves. Okay, so here's where you get to stop for a minute and figure out where would you fit on these categories. So what you want to do is take out a piece of paper, and you might want to, after I describe this, pause this video so that you can do this. So take out a piece of paper and number it 1 through 10, and you want to answer each question, or I see myself as, on a scale of 1 to 7. So 1 being I strongly disagree, 7 being strongly agree, and obviously you can put any number in between. So you want to talk about yourself or think about yourself in terms of extroversion or enthusiasm, whether you are critical or quarrelsome, meaning you like to start fights with people, if you are dependable and self-disciplined, if you feel that you are anxious or easily upset, if you're open to new experiences and feel that you are a complex person, if you feel that you are more reserved or more quiet, if you are sympathetic and warm, if you are disorganized or maybe careless about where you place your things, if you are calm and emotionally stable, or if you are conventional and uncreative. Conventional meaning that I like to stick with the things that I know as opposed to trying out new things. So pause here and answer those questions. And then once you're done, come back and we will score your assessment. So let's score your assessment. So to figure out your openness score, take your score on item 10 and your score on item 5. And your score on item 10 is actually going to be, your score on item 10 is actually going to be what we call reverse scored, which means that if you put a 7, you want to change it to a 3. If you put a 3, you want to change it to a 7. If you put a 2, change it to an 8, so put it at the opposite. Because if you notice, question number 10 is actually reverse written for openness, okay? So your reverse score on question 10 and your score on question 5 is going to be your openness score. In terms of conscientiousness, your reverse score on number 8, so again, flip it around the middle, and your score on number 3. For extroversion, your reverse score on number 6 and your score on number 1. For agreeableness, your reverse score on number 2 and you score on number 7. And then for neuroticism, your reverse score on number 9, and your score on number 4. So you may want to pause the video and do your scoring while you're looking at this. So let's talk about where you sit. In terms of averages, females average higher in openness than males do, but only by a small amount. So typically, as I said, you can look at these and compare yourself to others. We can talk about conscientiousness. There is, again, a small difference with females being higher in conscientiousness than males are. Extroversion, females, again, slightly higher than males. In terms of agreeableness, again, females slightly higher than males, but most of these are not statistically different. And then neuroticism, females are typically higher in neuroticism than males are. So those are the averages as stated by a lot of the research across the United States. So that you can compare yourself to that and see where you sit in terms of, are you average for your openness, your conscientiousness, your extroversion, your agreeableness, and your neuroticism. So when we talk about how we can describe people, if you're high in extroversion, then you may be seen as affectionate, someone who likes to join groups, talkative, fun-loving, active, passionate about something. If you are low in extroversion, you're seen as reserved or as more of a loner and quiet, sober, not meaning alcohol-wise, but meaning that you are less likely to laugh, less likely to find the funny in things, more passive and perceived as unfeeling. Whereas if we're talking about neuroticism, people who are high in neuroticism are experience a lot of more anxiety. They may be more temperamental, experience self-pity. They may be more self-conscious, worried about how others perceive them. They may be more emotional and feel more vulnerable. People who are low in neuroticism generally are calm, they're even-tempered, they're self-satisfied, meaning that they don't need others' opinions to make them feel good about themselves. They feel comfortable with how they are. They are typically seen as unemotional and hardy, meaning that they roll with the stressors that they deal with, as opposed to feeling a lot of anxiety. In terms of openness, people who are high in openness are perceived as imaginative, creative, original. They like variety. They're curious to try new things, and maybe more politically liberal than others. Whereas people who are low in openness are more down to earth. They may be uncreative or feel that they're uncreative. They are conventional, meaning that they prefer things to stay the same. They prefer routine. They're not curious about learning about new things as other people might be, and may be politically conservative. So in terms of the agreeableness, people who high in agreeableness may be perceived as soft-hearted. They're trusting, they're generous, they're acquiescent, meaning that they give in to other people as opposed to really stating their opinion. They may be more lenient and they may be more good-natured. Whereas people who are low in agreeableness may be perceived as ruthless, suspicious, stingy, antagonistic, meaning starting fights, critical of others, and generally just an irritable person. So the last one, conscientiousness, people who are high in this are conscientious. They are hardworking, they're well organized, they're punctual, they're ambitious, they persevere, meaning they keep going until the end. People who are low in conscientiousness may be seen as negligent, lazy, disorganized. They may be late all the time, they may seem aimless, and they may quit rather than finishing until the end. So how does this relate to what we started off talking about? So we can talk about our identity as how we define ourselves, how we perceive ourselves, but also how we want others to be, how we want others to perceive us. So if we want others to perceive us as high in conscientiousness, then we might keep our spaces very clean, that spaces that other people see very clean. So in terms of the identity, one of the things that researchers have found, especially Sam Gosling at the University of Texas at Austin has found, is that as humans, we experience what we call identity claims. This is what we do in terms of how do we demonstrate or claim these things about our identity. So we have sometimes self-directed identity claims, which means that they are reminders to the self to be who we want ourselves to be. Whereas we may have other directed identity claims, and this is where we're trying to show other people, hi, this is who I am. So you know, if you have, we were going back to the idea of shoes. If you have house shoes as opposed to going out shoes, those could be self-directed identity claims as opposed to other directed identity claims. As humans, we also have what we call feeling regulators. These may be things that we keep in our space in order to remind ourselves about things that make us happy. So if you find that you have pictures around you of people that make you happy, those can be what we consider feeling regulators. And here's something interesting. Feeling regulators can also be identity claims. So let's say that I have a picture of my family and of my children because they make me happy. And if someone comes into my office and they see that picture, the question becomes, is it facing me or is it facing others? Because if it's facing me, then it's self-directed identity claim, and it may also be a feeling regulator. Whereas if it's facing towards others, it's almost as if I want people to see, like, here's my happy family, see how happy we are. Another thing we can talk about in terms of personality is what sort of behavioral residue we as humans leave behind. So I joke with my husband that when he comes home from work, I can literally see exactly what he's done and what order he's done it based upon what things are left around the house. So the behavioral residue is what we leave behind as we behave. So do we make our breakfast and leave the wrapper on the counter, or do we make sure that everything is cleaned up after ourselves? Do we put our dishes in the dishwasher? Do we leave them in the sink for later or for someone else to clean up? So all of these things would be examples of behavioral residue. Think about the inside of your car. Is the inside of your car clean, or is it, are there indications of the things that you've done over the past week? Are there fast food wrappers and fast food containers, things like that? Those would be what we call a behavioral residue, which gives someone who's observing us an idea of what our personality is like. So let's get back to the shoes. So if someone has a lot of different types of shoes, maybe a lot of different colors of shoes, where would we put them on the big five? So we would probably put them higher in openness, maybe because they have a lot of different types, because they go to a lot of different places. Maybe they play a lot of different roles. We want to look at the shoes to see how conscientious these people are. Are they clean? Are they kept orderly? Or are they, thrown in a big pile? Or do the people not even know that they actually have them anymore? Extroversion, let's talk about color. Let's talk about pattern. Does the person have lots of, very useful and, quote unquote normal black shoes, or do they have all these different colors of shoes? So we can relate that to extroversion. In terms of agreeableness, we can also think about the colors, because if we're trying to be highly agreeable, we don't want others to really look at us as different. We want people to look at us as normal. And so we might not have like funky colors or funky designs on our shoes. And then neuroticism, again, could also relate to the colors and the numbers of shoes, how they're kept, and what status they're in. So for example, does the person have Converse All-Stars that are consistently cleaned every week, something like that? So where else can we learn about humans? Well, we talked about this idea of behavioral residue. We talked about this idea of identity claims. So if we look around people's bedrooms, if we look around people's office spaces, if we look around people's bathrooms, now I'm not talking about like going through their cabinets and looking through their stuff. That's not what I'm talking about. But just what you can see as you're looking around at a person's space. What does that tell you about their big five factors personality? We can look at their music collections. Historically, it was CD collections. Now it might be, can I flip through your iPod and see what sort of music you have on there and what sort of music you listen to the most often? We can talk about, some people have email signatures, and that is a outward facing identity claim to other people, because obviously other people are going to be seeing this. It's not for me to be seeing every day. We can talk about our pets. We can talk about our social media and how often we post about our pets, how often we post about our family. What sort of photos do we post in social media? Do we post about, do we post selfies? Do we post posies? Do we post pictures of our family members? And then finally, I mean, if you want to learn a lot about a person, you can go through their garbage. One thing to keep in mind is that looking at any of these things, if they're a shared space, meaning that they share the space with other people, then it is not going to be 100% indicator of that one individual's personality. Okay, so what do you want to do now? You can go watch people, and you can use this eye for personality traits. You don't want to be super like Snoopy going through people's offices and things like that. And that's why I always suggest that when we're looking at for personality traits, we're kind of looking at what we can see as opposed to like rifling through things, because that's just creepy. If you want to learn more about what we've talked about today, you can read Sam Gosling's Snoop, What Your Stuff Says About You. And then you can also take my Psychology of Personality class, which is Psych 2316 at Northwest Vista College in San Antonio. So these are my references. And as I've said, you can feel free to go back through and repeat the slides relating to the Big Five questionnaire and also how to score it. In the area below, I've actually put an online assessment of the Big Five as well, and you can use that in order to get more information and to get more in depth with what we've been studying. You can also use that link to find out more about your personality traits online. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope to talk to you soon in terms of coming to one of my classes. Thanks.